I always know that the Lord is doing, like, we're supposed to go in this direction when both of our hearts are right on the same track. You know, if one of you is not in it, like, you know, like, you're probably, like, not the right direction to go.
Well, hey, everybody, welcome to our Project 167 podcast. I am here today with a really amazing and special guest, my friend Julian. So, Julian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Pumped that you're here. Julian,
I'm so happy to be Cisneros.
Cisneros.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah. So, Paisan, like.
No, Spanish. That's
it's Spanish. I was thinking, I was giving you maybe a little more credit than I should.
I know, you're like, wait, I thought we had more in common. I thought we had the Italian thing going.
I love this guy. We've gotten to know each other probably over like the last year or so.
That's right.
And it's awesome to hang out with you.
Yeah,
and
it's an honor to
I feel
be
like
here.
I could talk for hours and stuff. But,
yeah.
So we're here, Project 167, as you guys know. What we do here is we talk about a couple of focused areas, but we also pursue wherever the conversation is leading us. We talk about our marriages and our relationships. We talk about parenting. And we also talk about work. And lately we've been trying to springboard into the conversation from the sermon, which was on Sabbathing. So before we get there, so that's my little intro, right?
Okay.
Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and give a little bit of a background, and we'll meander from there.
Well, my name's Julian, right, as we have established, and I grew up in Southern California. My wife and I have been married for 13 years now. We have 3 children, 10, 7, and 2. A year ago, we made the craziest move of our life. We moved from Anaheim, California to Sewickley and to Pittsburgh,
Western Pennsylvania.
Was, I think one of the hardest things we've ever done, but also one of the greatest things we've ever done. You know, people are always asking, like, why would you move to Pittsburgh?
Right.
Like, that is insane. And the simplest response is just like, we really felt like God literally uprooted our hearts and just made it abundantly clear that he was going to plant that right here in this area.
Wow.
And so, I mean, there's a long story there. So we kind of moved out of this like obedience, this kind of like, well, there's no way around it. It's kind of crazy. There's way more depth I could go into to how we even realized that. But so we kind of just kept that obedience train going.
It's
and
a
it
voice
led us
of God
here.
thing.
Yeah.
You and your wife, and you guys were together. You were united in that.
You have
hearing
to be.
that. You have
How
to
could
be,
you
right?
not? Yeah. I mean, we'd always talk about it like jokingly. She's from here. So we moved here. She's got a bunch of family here. So we've been coming back for years. Yeah. And her family's always like, hey, when are you going to move to Pittsburgh? And I'm like, never. Even a year.
You're like, have you been to Anaheim?
Have you been to Orange County, California? Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. We lived in LA for a long while as well.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, like, eventually we just
I mean, when God's voice is leading you in a direction and you're both attuned to hearing it.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't get softer.
Well, I
think it gets louder.
It does. And there was like advice I got from my youth pastor growing up when we got married. He married us. And he's just like, I always know that the Lord is doing, like, we're supposed to go in this direction when both of our hearts are right on the same track. If one of you is not in it, like, like, you're probably like not the right direction to go.
Yeah.
And so Bree's heart was kind of, I think, there a little before mine, but then once mine hit, that was it. Yeah. And then, I mean, I literally looked on Zillow, and the first house that popped up is the house we live in now.
You're kidding me.
I'm not joking.
That's unbelievable.
Like, when my heart was finally like, yeah, I think we can do it. Okay. That was a Thursday. We closed on that house on Monday.
Was this was during COVID? Whenever?
No, this was
okay. Whenever, like, the lightning round of buying a house.
This was when the interest rates were extremely high, and you probably shouldn't buy. This was literally that was November 2023, and we closed and moved January 2024.
Oh gosh!
So we've only been here, a
little over a year.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Please.
I hope this isn't embarrassing to you, but so I have a friend who you connected with at Sewickley, and he was just telling me about it. He goes, when you come to Sewickley, you have to meet this guy, Julian. And I was like, awesome. I was like, well, tell me what he looks like, or tell me so I will know him. He goes, he looks like Aquaman.
Oh my goodness!
Is that funny or like from a distance?
I get it sometimes. Cool hair. It does.
Yeah.
I used to have my hair was I used to bleach it. So it would be like long bleached hair. So during the time
Really?
of like Aquaman.
Was this like high school post?
No, this is like a
20s?
year ago.
Really?
A couple years ago. It's
Oh,
all
wow.
grown out now, but
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it might happen again. But
Yeah,
that's
so then
hilarious.
we bumped into each other on a Sunday. Like there was a church picnic
There's
thing
a church picnic.
at Sewickley, and we just started talking. Then it all came back to me. I'm like, oh, this is who he was talking about.
That's
so,
hilarious.
anyways, I think that's hilarious.
That is hilarious.
Yeah. So Anaheim and Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Two different worlds.
Totally.
Have you ever like A-B'd them? Like what's it like there? And what's it like here?
I just got a chance to do that.
Really?
Because I was just in California last week.
Okay.
Visiting, home with my family.
Yeah.
And or
Your
home.
Italian
It's so
family.
weird to say home. Yeah, my Italian family is great. Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference I could say is certainly the weather,
of course, right?
and the food selection.
Okay.
Food's pretty. I mean, Orange County, you got all that amazing Mexican food. You got also amazing Asian food.
So lots of Taco Bells, lots of Panda Expresses.
Oh my goodness. Okay. 8 minutes in.
When are we done?
We done in 10? All right.
But like authentic.
Yeah, it's just
Mexican
the authentic.
food.
Yeah, an authentic
Yeah,
Asian.
yeah.
I mean, not that that's not here. It's just not the same. It's not the same level. Sorry to say.
Well, that population isn't like dense here. And
No,
so
not at all.
The number of
It's more just a density thing. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Like here, you have a lot of great Italian food.
Right.
You have great,
Right.
just all American.
amazing pierogies.
Amazing
Everywhere you
pierogies.
wanna
I didn't
go.
even know what a pierogi was till I met my wife, and she's like, "You've never had this?"
Really?
Yeah. And then
Isn't that funny how what is so regular to you can be foreign to somebody else?
Yeah,
Just side note. Anyways.
truly.
Okay. So the weather and the food. What
Right.
about pace of life?
Pace of life
how
is
does that
okay.
compare?
So this is a great thing. My wife and I have really kind of unpacked that. It's slower here. Okay, the people are different here, and we couldn't put our finger on it because everyone we met was really genuine. Everyone we met was really welcoming and interested in you. And we realized that back home or back in Southern California, I think a lot of the difference when you meet someone, they're just saying, like, within probably within a minute, someone's gonna be like, "Well, what do you do?" Right?
Quickly.
What do you do? Super quickly.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like a cultural thing. It's just something you always ask. But it puts you in this position where you better have something cool to respond to with that,
Oh, why?
Whereas here, no one asked us that. It was, how are you? It was, and then the what do you do came until,
Eventually.
maybe it eventually came, maybe not even in that first interaction. It would come later.
Really?
And we started realizing like, wow, like we're not being sized up by what we do. People actually are caring about who you are as just a human being,
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a
So
lot
it's
of
a major difference.
That's a big difference.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. I'm guessing your kids will feel.
I sure hope.
And not know as much in California versus in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I often ask people, are you where you're from?
Yeah.
Are you from Pittsburgh? Where are you at in Pittsburgh? Because then you get a little bit of knowledge of their nuance and
Right.
what side of the city they come from and what they like and don't sort of like. So have you bumped into that uniqueness in Pittsburgh that people are a little territorial and they don't cross bridges?
Oh gosh, that's so funny to me. Well, you realize
real.
You realize it really quick when you're saying, "Oh, it's 30 minutes away," and people are not wanting to do it, not wanting to go. And I'm like, 30 minutes away. It takes me 15 minutes to just get like to the main road, and then it takes me another 45 minutes just to get to the like 2 cities over just to show up to this birthday party. So
This is in California.
This is in California. So
we
you're
don't know
you're
traffic.
just so used to it. Like 30 minutes is down the street pretty much. But here the mentality is like, no, it's 30 minutes. I don't really want to go. And then the whole bridge thing like blows my mind that there's I don't notice it so much with younger people, but I feel like there's a certain age limit where all of a sudden people are like, I never go to the South Hills. I never go to.
There's like a line there. I don't cross over that line. I grew up in Beaver County.
Okay.
So not too far from where we are right now. But you would have thought at times people were like, well, that's all the way in Pittsburgh.
Right.
Like, do we have to pack a lunch and get a hotel to go
Isn't
there?
that funny?
It is, and it's not that far.
And it's really not that far. Drive down 65.
Yeah.
You
I commuted from Beaver County to Duquesne University for graduate school multiple nights a week, and it was just like,
Yeah.
not a big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a thing. It's a Pittsburgh thing. So can we ask what do you do without being superficial? Like,
Yeah, well, we've talked enough, right?
We have, yes.
Yeah,
I know, but not everybody else knows.
Well, I do a lot of things now. For the last 15 years, I've been a film composer, doing music for movies, commercials, TV shows, lots of documentaries, tons of stuff for National Geographic, tons of stuff for car commercials, all that kind of stuff. I mean, the list goes on and on. And
Julian's first question when he walked in the studio is, he asked Carla, "What are you guys shooting on?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "What does that mean?" He's talking camera.
I'm looking at your lights. There's some aperture lights.
I saw
here.
you. You've been the first guest who came in and understood it all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my wife and I kind of also have a podcast that we do occasionally. It's just us talking about being two creative people married to each other, and what that's like, and navigating creative careers,
creative tension,
we call it creative harmony, and it's not a plug because we don't really do it frequently, but
there's some episodes out there.
We've done some podcasting, so we understand the world. So I can't help but walk in here and be like, "Oh, that's nice. I wish I had a static set.
Yes,
this would be very cool."
Yeah.
So my wife is she's a hairstylist, right? Mm-hmm. But she's a very well-known hairstylist, and so she travels a lot. And in 2020, when all traveling stopped, and I was busy for quite a bit during 2020. But then, because I'm in post, production slowed down. Eventually, I found myself being just sitting around.
So the lag, there were probably some stuff in the can.
There was
movies,
stuff in the can,
commercials, whatever.
There was stuff in the can
because everything sort of stopped, right?
Right.
We hadn't had good movies for a while because people were on pause. But it's do we have good movies?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
That's a whole. We could talk. That's podcast number
that's a
2.
Separate podcast.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. But we started a business together.
Okay.
So that was the first time we kind of brought our careers together, and that's when we started doing production, and we have an online hair education business. But yeah, that's kind of what we do now to this day. That's kind of fills up a lot more of our time.
And you get to travel. You guys travel.
We travel a lot. Yes, she travels tons.
She does a ton.
Yes. Okay. Yes, she'll travel about at least once a month. She'll go, but yeah, we're really. I mean, those are the things that really started honing us in as a family. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that we travel, the fact that we're busy, so we had to find time to really when we're around, really be present with each other, which eventually leads to kind of what I'm doing now.
Look at you being the
host. Is that a good segment?
Right
Is
now,
that a good segue?
Did amazing right there.
Cue segue. All right.
First, we're going to go to a commercial break.
Yeah.
So I think the first time we had coffee, this concept sort of was new. And maybe not new to you, definitely new to me. You shared a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. Then the last time we grabbed a coffee, you were full-fledged, sharing more about Sabbathing. And so what does this look like, this process of stopping? And what does it look like in the Cisneros household? And what does it look like in your heart? Because I know God has put some things in you that I believe are going to be emerging out to the world soon. So,
well, I heard a sermon in 2019, and it was a sermon on Sabbath, just a simple sermon. Probably like a lot of people yesterday, on Sunday, hearing a sermon on Sabbath. Why have I not really heard any sermons on Sabbath? This is crazy. I mean, I grew up in church, actively attended, chasing the Lord my whole life. Even going to ministry school at one point.
Yeah, you have an amazing church background.
Right.
Yeah, so you know the drill. You've been there.
But why is, so I'm sitting there listening to the sermon on the Sabbath, and it's just hitting me like a ton of bricks. And it's also surprising me that why is this new news,
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of, how you hear a sermon, it takes maybe a few 6 months to become something into your life.
I don't like hearing that, but I do understand.
It was
that.
2020 when we're sitting around and we're just on our phones all the time. We're just doing. Our kids are all separate rooms, and we're all just in the home getting by. When I realized, I'm like, we need to get off our phones and we need to be present with each other. We have to connect. And plus, me and my wife are just constantly modeling that we're just on our phone. Like we're in the kitchen, and in between anything we do, we're just scrolling away.
Yeah.
So I thought of the sermon on the Sabbath came up, and then I just realized, okay, this Sunday we're just not going to go on our phones, right? We lasted 1 hour, okay. And
was there gnashing of teeth?
There was, and we had our children were a little younger at the time, so it was way more difficult. And you train a child to be on their essentially they're 1 year old already like watching TV.
Babysitter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're at the restaurant, you're throwing on
Yeah.
some show, and I'm not going to plug any shows, any kids shows.
It's
So
okay.
I almost let it slip, and I'm like, no, don't say that.
You were
show.
gonna be
don't
judged.
Say that YouTube shit. Don't.
The church judgment is real.
So the following week, I was like, I'm determined to get through this day off our phones. But one of the things we like doing is playing music in the house. One of the things we like taking pictures.
Yeah.
We like doing stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, we're gonna do an analog Sunday, and that's where the first time that word ever came out of my mouth. We're going to go all analog this Sunday. So if you want to listen to music on Spotify or whatever, Sonos in the house, no, we're just going to spin records. I have a lot of records. I always collect them.
So the actual vinyl.
Straight up vinyl, because it's analog.
Yeah.
And then we're going to, instead of taking pictures on our phones, we're going to take Polaroids. If we want to go watch
So you
YouTube.
have a Polaroid camera?
Yeah, we had one. It's just sitting there collecting
Yeah.
dust.
Yeah.
Instead of YouTube or Netflix or whatever, we're going to go to a movie.
Okay.
Or I had old VHSs, and I'm like, I kind of had a TV downstairs. I'm like, let's
big
just
tube.
VHS, right? And we made it through. We made it through that first Sunday.
Non-digital, sort of
Non-digital.
disconnected from this and reconnected to like another period of time.
Yeah.
Right?
Basically like my childhood of the 90s, like this, but it's so interesting how that's still technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's so much, the technology we have now is just so invading and so like accessible that the effort of putting a record on and listening to that music made sure that you listened to the music. And then all of a sudden, no matter what you're doing, it's going to stop in like 7 or 8 minutes because you have to flip the record.
Yeah.
So then
you're 6 tracks or whatever. Yeah.
So then all of a sudden, and then you want to take a picture, you better make sure that picture is meaningful because you only have 7 more Polaroids to take,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's weird how all of a sudden, and we realized that it was that slowing down, but not necessarily like taking away everything.
Right.
It's just changing the way we did things, made it sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did it the week after. And then 1 month turned into 2. And 1 year turned into 4. And it just became a part of our life. We would tell people about it.
Your rhythms.
Yeah, it became a habit of the household. It became something that my wife and I cherished so much. It was something that we really looked forward to. So you're talking about the Sabbath. Eventually that Sabbath element came into our hearts. So it was first kind of this digital kind of like way to just stay off our phones.
Yeah, it starts as a bit of a behavior.
Change our behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then eventually it started to be this sweetness, this joyful time in our household where we were present with our children. No matter what they knew, mom and dad would just be hanging out with them. Mom and dad will be taking them to church. Afterwards, we'll go do something. But as the years went on, the Sabbath element began to grow, like the actual heart of it. And the realization that we're kind of tapping into something that is sacred and holy,
Yeah.
literally.
I don't think we say that word enough.
It is.
It's a sacred thing.
It's sacred.
Yeah.
It's sacred and it's holy, and it's all throughout the scripture that it is holy.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the commandment and, 10 commandments, he says he's made the Sabbath day holy.
Yeah.
So we started to experience that in real life and in our home.
That's awesome.
So I'll get to the fun part where it started to go outside of our home. And it's actually a great way to look at the trajectory of even getting here to Pittsburgh, because I said we moved here out of obedience. It didn't really make full sense. I don't know why we're going to Pittsburgh and why are we leaving beautiful sunny Southern California? All our family, all our friends, our whole life. Why would we uproot
your network, all that stuff?
Our network, even the careers, and moved in obedience, not knowing why. But we had been obedient enough times in the past to know that, well, he's going to show up and we're going to be able to look back and know exactly why we did that.
Yeah.
So luckily, if you have a pattern of obedience in your life to the Lord, you start to be able to, your faith grows because you're eventually I can look back and be like, God's not going to leave me.
Yeah.
hanging here.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And if I don't go, you know, I'm going to miss out on something special, something super incredible.
So the big steps of obedience started with small steps of obedience in your faith builds.
Yes.
Yeah. It's true with all of the faith practices.
Basically all, right?
Yes. And so you get a story.
Exactly.
And you have some trust built up in that bank account. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, you know,
it's a great point, by the way.
I mean, it's just the journey, the adventure of following the Lord.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until being in Pittsburgh that I started getting to know people like you and others, and people just naturally ask, well, what kind of stuff, you know, what's your family life like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then I started mentioning this Analog Sunday, just super, I mean, it become a part of our life, so it would just normally get brought up. And people are like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Analog Sunday, sweet. What is that? So I start telling them. Eventually, I'm introduced to a man who you know.
Yes.
He's been on the podcast before, Mr. Patrick Coletti.
Lovely
I will
man.
Gladly shout that man out.
He's great.
And it wasn't until meeting him he had been practicing the Sabbath with his family for years. And so I think I was kind of introduced to him because of that.
Oh, wow.
And we met, and Patrick's like, this is really interesting. Tell me more. And then Patrick's like, let's meet next week. Tell me more.
Tell me more. Yeah.
And we eventually kept meeting, and then it was him who really said, this needs to be outside of your home. Like Analog Sunday needs to now be in the world, like outside of your home.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And something that was very genuine, very precious to just my family, never even a thought in my mind to be outside of our home. All of a sudden, the idea was planted. And he's very faithfully continued to meet with me and make this whole thing a reality. So
he's like a nurturer and a waterer.
Yes.
Help keep you going and help, because he's pretty broadly experienced in the marketplace, has a big network. So let me just, as you're about to go to what you're saying, is I just feel like I've been meaning to send Patrick this text or to give him a call. So the whole idea of Project 167, it actually was, this is funny, it was birthed on a trip I was on with Patrick.
Really?
Yeah. And so we came back from sessions, and we went to Florida to an Axios conference, connected with the, I forget the name of the group now. They changed their name. Anyways, he was like, so what's on your heart? What's God doing? I was like, I don't know. I just feel like I think there's supposed to be a platform to speak to marriages and parenting and our work life. And I think the church is supposed to like lean into that. I don't know if we do enough. So here we are. And it's amazing how Patrick has just been like inspirational in my life and yours as well. So pretty cool.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thank you, Patrick.
Gift. Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah. Yeah. He's an activator.
He is an activator.
Okay. So back to, he's saying this needs to get outside of your home and sort of platformed or
shared.
You know,
and I'm like, what does that even look like?
Yeah.
Like, I've never even thought of that being something.
Yeah.
And, you know, he just kind of, if it literally wasn't for Patrick meeting with me consistently, I never would have seen what it could become. And the more I started talking about it, the more people started hearing about it in Sewickley. You know, people are like, dude, I am dying to get off my phone. My kids are always on their phone. And all of a sudden, as I was just talking about my experience with Patrick and this or that, families would be like, wait, I do need that.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to notice.
It's a heart need.
Yeah, and I just started to notice, like, okay. And then we'd be having this conversation with another family, and my kids would be playing out in the back, and their kids would be on their iPads, just with YouTube on, you know? And so we're having this conversation, and the parents would all of a sudden be like, oh, looking at my kids doing that. Like, they're like,
guilty.
We need this.
Yeah, we need it.
But then this is the craziest part. They're like, what do I do? And I'm like, what do you mean, what do you do? Like, just get off your phones. Go spend time together. Go to the park. Go. They're like, no, I don't know. Like, do you have ideas? Like, what do I?
Yeah.
And that's when I started to realize maybe there's something there.
People need help.
People need help.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think Analog Sunday really started to be born, where this desire to be off your phones, to be present with each other, started to meet this in my heart, like this call to rest that God has placed literally in us. I think it is in our DNA, like our bodies, our physiology.
Yes.
You know, literally from our soul to our mind to our actual heart to our actual brain needs rest. And now more than ever, people are so distracted and so stimulated that people are just burning out. Families are disconnected more than ever.
Do you think it's an addiction?
Yes.
Like similar behavior to what we would say is an addict of a substance.
Yes.
I need another hit.
Yes.
I need another hit.
Where do you spend your money? Where do you spend your time?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an idol.
Yeah.
It's an addiction. I mean, it does center. It's like it's impossible to separate Analog Sunday or the Sabbath from the concept of having to put your phone away. Like your phone is the great distractor in today's world.
Yes.
And this is a whole other, as Analog Sunday started to become something like, okay, now I need to, and this is again, Patrick's great nurturing spirit. He's like, why don't you read this book? Why don't you read that book? Like he's like he like evolved. It's like he's revealing slowly a point that he knew he wanted to make to you, but he'll be patient.
He's incredibly patient with it.
God, this is the Patrick Coletti podcast where
this episode's dedicated to Patrick Coletti, who is Italian.
He is Italian. Yeah, that is hilarious. This is the Italian podcast. So, the depths of then the spiritual element. So then I started pouring into the scripture and really learning the Sabbath. I bought the book The Sabbath, which is written by Herschel. He's a Jew. I'm not sure if he's an Hasidic Jew or not, but I just know he's practicing. He wrote this in the 40s.
Okay.
And have you heard of this book?
You told me about it.
Yeah,
but I did not get it yet.
He wrote it in the 40s.
Because the practice of Sabbath is a sacred thing in the Jewish faith.
Yes.
If you're a practicing actively Jewish person, like the Catholic sort of Christian church, we don't hold it sacredly, but Jewish folks do.
Fully sacred.
Yeah.
And so I started reading that book, and I started the intro of that book is literally his daughter writing the intro, talking about like how beautiful like these days were, how kind of weird they were, like how it felt like, they were kind of outside of the culture, but then her perspective as an adult being like, this is one of the greatest things that the greatest gift my father ever gave me.
The word gift always comes up when someone is on the receiving end of someone being willing to be countercultural.
Yes.
To go against the grain. Yeah.
Yes.
Gift.
And I love these are concepts that, he follows, I think, like the Jewish law pretty intensely.
Sure.
So they don't light fires. They don't spend money. They don't, their meals are prepared the day before.
Yes.
Everything.
No cooking.
Yeah. It's Shabbat. It's fully Shabbat.
Right.
So but the concepts of it, like the heart of it, are so incredible. And that's where the concept of, he calls it, the Sabbath architecture of time. And as you start reading his words, he's starting to talk about, mankind uses our resource to build space, right? We use our time to build, our resources to build space, like these lights, buildings, all that kind of stuff, careers, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, but the Sabbath is about using our resource to build time. So or time is the resource.
Like a different kind of space.
Yeah, it's like you're building this perfect day. You're building this day that is a house of rest. It's like a house, like a sanctuary of connection. So all of those concepts, this is what I've been experiencing. This is exactly what I've been experiencing.
Over the course of time.
Over the course of the last 5 years.
Because I imagine some folks will be like, well, I tried it once, it didn't work.
Yeah, no. It's over the course of time. It's over the course, and it's not every Sunday. You know, it's like but the continual...
You're not religious about it.
No.
And sort of is dogmatic the right word? Almost like heavy-handed with your kids.
Right.
but it's a rhythm.
Right. And I realized that I'm like, this is technically not very religious, the analog element of it, like this is very non-religious to the Shabbat tradition, but then, then you could make the point of like, as a Christian,
yes.
It's more about the heart, right?
Yeah.
It's about like, are you posturing yourself to be in a position of connecting to the Lord, to your family? Are you, so if lighting a fire and like laying together, like reading a book next to the fire brings that connection, I'm going to run to that.
Yeah.
And that's something we did,
Yeah.
So but one of the cool things that Shabbat always includes like a meal, like a feast. So we started doing that. But instead of preparing it before, we use it as an activity with our children to fill up the afternoon.
Involve them.
We make our meals from scratch.
Yeah.
And like, so we're cooking with our family. We got records playing. Can you imagine this? We're taking Polaroids. There's a joy. Literally, the Holy Spirit is thick in the room, in the house. I can think of it. I could start crying when I think about how beautiful it is. When you are resting, you are present.
Present. That's the word I keep hearing. Present.
Yes, you are present because we're so distracted. Right. So it is countercultural to almost be present.
Do your kids look forward to that?
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. My 7-year-old right now, who still likes playing video games, she's like, but my daughter, this will make me cry too. Like we were in California. She's like, Dad, I want to put a message in a bottle and throw it out on the beach. I'm like, no, Ayla, like, it's littering. and she
20 years ago,
she shows me the message she wrote, and it said, "Try Analog Sunday."
Oh, you're kidding me. This is your daughter?
I'll read it to you. Try Analog Sunday. She wrote this. This is the message she wanted to put in a bottle for families to read. It says, "Try Analog Sunday. Trust me, it is a very good thing to do. Please do it." Smiley face, smiley face.
Oh my gosh.
And it's funny because then she put, "Go to Instagram or to the future book," she wrote down, which is hilarious because there's really nothing going on Instagram with Analog Sunday. But
our kids are more prophetic than we realize.
Maybe
sometimes.
she is. So that's
it's had I'm hearing this this net beautiful effect we all long for on our family and on your marriage.
Yes. Truly.
Oneness, alignment. What can you share some of what are you experiencing as a family because of this commitment?
Well, there's certainly a team mentality. Like there's a family. I mean, it's a family.
Well, you used the word harmony earlier.
Yeah, there's a harmony in between us all. There is a anticipation to it. There is a certain level. I think that it's hard to gauge the major shift because we've been doing this since our children are fairly young. But I think our children have a lower kind of stress level in the house. Between my wife and I, we always know like Analog Sunday's coming and the Sabbath is coming, even our children, and it'll be good. So it almost like becomes this part of your life where you realize like life gets hard, life gets very stressful,
it's full.
All of that, family stuff, all that, but there's always this one day. So if anything, our family has probably a lower level of anxiety, probably a deeper connection that, I don't know how, what would it be like if we weren't doing it?
I'll make an observation. I haven't shared this with you, but when I have been with you, and I think I've been with Bree in a couple of like quicker interactions. Yeah, that's the right word. Like circles after church or whatever. But you are not uncomfortable in silence. A lot of us are. Like I got to say something, or I got to look, or I got to think of something. But as I've sat with you a couple of times, I'm just like, sometimes there's just a.
Well, you actually said this in your sermon, unhurried.
Unhurried.
You said unhurried a lot.
Yeah.
And this is a great segue to talking about the Sabbath in your life, because this is something I'd like to learn as well. Yeah. Because you've been practicing your Sabbath on Fridays for years. And you've said to me how imperative or how integral that your Fridays have been to your life and to your marriage.
Yeah. I think the great fear I love how you just turned into the, you've segued well. Now you're leading the conversation. I always have this, fear is, I grew up in a tradition where if you said fear, it kind of was like, well, you lack faith. But no, I have this, like, I don't want to be a statistic in ministry. I don't want to burn out.
I can attest to that. You are very intentional.
Yeah, I don't. Mm-hmm. I just don't. And I think a lot of folks, the weight of ministry is heavy, but we're not supposed to carry it. And for me, Sabbath has been a day of boundary and of trust and saying, I am going to rest. Because sometimes the needs people have that you have to minister to or respond to or care for are urgent and they're heavy. But I am not. We think pastors are supposed to carry all that.
Right.
I'm supposed to point us to Jesus, signpost, not carry all of it. And somehow along the way, it's a temptation to begin to believe that it's all on your shoulders and that not that you're the savior, but you're the savior. You know?
Well, culturally, I think you've been put in that position.
Right.
And that's not right. It's like you've been the king.
Yeah, it's not a thing.
Whereas not Jesus has been the king. It's like, well, we need our pastor to solve our problems or to do this or to carry that weight.
Right. Or you go to sometimes what I'll do when people come to me for prayer, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to agree with you. How about you pray? Like leading them to pray for it versus just and here in Pittsburgh, deeply steeped in Catholicism, there's a view of well, you'll be the priest who does it for me. So I understand all of that. And for me, it has been a way of stopping and of trusting. And it really started in a church where our pace, we worked at a breakneck pace at the previous church I was. And it was awesome and it was fun, but sometimes it was overwhelming and a little addictive.
Right.
Like the adrenaline of next and more. I think we're uncomfortable with slower seasons of growth. When you look back at your life, like the Lord grows us over time.
Right.
Not always just this instant oatmeal.
Absolutely.
Like 30 seconds and boom, you're now, no, it's like formative and it's this experience and that conversation and this sermon and that song. It all kind of like you said, 6 months later, a sermon actually hits your heart.
Sunk in there.
Yeah. Why should we be uncomfortable with that? And so for me, Sabbathing is resting in God's provision. It was time for a long time when my kids were younger. On Friday, I had the beautiful advantage of a weekday off. My kids were at school, so it was Brooke and Dave time.
That's amazing.
And that's hard to get when you got little kids.
Yeah.
And when you got little kids in ministry.
I mean, that's impossible.
Yeah, where your evenings are busy and you're full. So I longed for Fridays. I loved it because it was like a restorative day for me. So yeah, I am of these ways of Jesus. Generosity has been a big one because it breaks the grips of selfishness in my heart.
For sure. And
Sabbathing breaks the tendency to really believe that work is what sustains me. And I don't think we were created. We were supposed to work, but not created for work. I think we were created for worship.
Oh, for sure.
And sometimes we worship work, and Sabbath breaks that.
Yeah, that is so interesting. You're describing what we observe just with people in general in our culture, American culture, just not even Western culture, just this hustle culture, just this like if you are, and I think even in Pittsburgh, I was just talking to someone about it. You know, in Pittsburgh, that kind of blue collar heritage of like, and again, I don't want to put it down because people were working to provide for their families. People have always been working hard to make sure that they have food over on the table, roof over their head.
Yeah.
But this idea of working never ends. You know, it's like this almost like a scarcity of like, if I'm not working, then it's going to fall apart.
That's why sometimes retirement is like an end for people.
Yeah.
Because they've lost identity.
Exactly. And so, you know, that culture is, I think, the American culture. You know, we work hard. We keep working now that we have our emails and everything on our phones. It just never stops. So to stop is actually like this. And you said this in your sermon. It's like kind of like seen as weak or seen as like lame or like you are lazy. Yeah. And we know what the Proverbs say about lazy people.
Not good.
Or the sluggard, you know.
Sloth.
The sloth. I mean, he puts his hand in a bowl of food and is too tired to bring it to his mouth.
That's old school right there.
But it's like that's what it's looked like if you actually take a day of rest. I mean, I was
just
this
talking
like
on the previous podcast. Allison, podcast girl, that's her nickname. Someone called her that. She said, sometimes I feel guilty if my husband and kids are away, soccer practice, and I take a nap. She's like, I hurry up and wake up before they get home because I don't want them to know I took a nap.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, why?
Or you feel like you need to be doing
And
something.
she's the opposite of lazy.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Allison's a hard worker and always, it was just an interesting observation she made.
Right.
That's a cultural thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, people are telling me, I'm talking to certain family members that are looking at me like I'm crazy. Like they're like like Analog Sunday, the Sabbath. They're like, sounds cool. While they're looking at me with these exhausted eyes, and I know their life. You mentioned to me, yourself in ministry. I was just I was in California. I was with a dear friend of mine who's a pastor, known him for many years. And he just, he's obedient to the Lord in the most beautiful ways, but he is burnt out. And these are more his words, because as I was talking about just what's going on with me with Analog Sunday, he puts his hands in his face and he starts weeping.
Wow.
And he's just like, this is the Lord right now telling me that I need to start Sabbathing. Like, he's literally telling me right now that I'm going to like unravel if I don't start doing this now.
You lose yourself.
He sent me, this is amazing, because
That's great to hear.
yeah.
Like
he talk about like anyone in ministry. You're a strong leader. You're a go-getter.
Sure.
So this man, with that new prerogative from the Lord, sends me on Saturday. So I had the conversation with him like maybe Wednesday. Saturday, he's at the beach sending me Polaroids.
Awesome.
With his family.
That's awesome.
And he's just like, for the rest of my life. And now yesterday I get a text from him. I just got a camper. We're going to start camping.
Oh, come on.
I'm just like,
That's like unplugging.
It's literally just like a switch. There's
Yeah.
something clogged,
Yeah.
and the idea of rest. Again, it's just, there's nothing new under the sun. This is something that God's been, modeling to us. Even Jesus modeled to us,
Yeah.
and somehow our
Yeah.
culture has just drifted so far away. And then, that is accelerated because of screens. But the benefits of it are truly incredible.
Yeah.
And to the world, to them, like Analog Sunday, I think is attractive to the world.
Boy, that's a great point.
They're just like, well, I do need to get off my screens. My kids are just, have you been to a high school lately? High school lunches, no one talks to each other.
Yeah, have you
People
sat in
are
a
telling
waiting
me,
room at the doctor's office? Nobody looks at each
no
other.
one looks at each other. You're in line at
weird.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
No one's looking at each
Yeah.
other. So, you have all these parents who are like, dude, my kids are literally just addicted to their
Yeah.
screens. I'm addicted to my screens. So Analog Sunday has this other element that I think reaches outside the church, but it's just tapping into something that God built into them.
Well, I think you're right. I have not, oh my gosh, if I had a fourth or third, I don't know how many points I had this weekend. It's a witness to the world of a different way. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it is evidence of you can be different.
Yeah.
There is life in different.
Well, you talk about, how Christians look different in the world, right? What's the difference? I mean, there's
It's not
so
just
much
a cross around our neck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
come to church, or like, I think Christians have this element. They look very similar to the world. Like, Christians don't look different enough. Not all, of course, but maybe like as a whole, they're the way they're living their life isn't much different than your person that's living in the world, right? But there's this opportunity with the Sabbath for the church to have this different pace of life. And the fruits of that are like you're unhurried. You have a tight family. You yourself are chill in the silence.
There's an identity.
And then
transformation.
all of a sudden the world can then look at that and be like, that's different.
And attractive.
I'm spinning out of control. I'm full of anxiety. I'm blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I don't even know my kids. I don't even know this, blah, blah, blah. And then you look at these Christians who are practicing this thing that God has told them to do since the beginning. And then in that, there's a witness. There is something absolutely beautiful and precious that I think will cross that line if more and more of God's people start practicing the Sabbath.
Yeah.
That becomes this whole other, it's not even an outreach. It's not like this active evangelical evangelism,
But couldn't
It's
that be
just
the birthplace of revival in our
of
culture?
course. Yeah.
In our world today, not necessarily a church service or a tent meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Those are great. Those are beautiful. But there could be a cultural revival if God's people live just the way He invites us to live.
Yes.
And it would catch like wildfire.
Yes. And it's fun.
It's awesome.
It's awesome.
I'm not
it's
afraid to say
crazy.
that God blesses it. I believe He does. He says it in his
says it
word.
in the Bible.
It's right there.
I mean, oh my gosh, like this is a whole other conversation. I do want to ask you about what the Lord says about the Sabbath in Hebrews, where
the Sabbath rest.
he talks about the Sabbath rest, but he's talking about people who aren't entering the promised land because they didn't Sabbath.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like what does that look like today if we were to do some exegesis and some hermeneutics?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
What would that look like?
Like profaning the Sabbath, literally. I pointed to it because I wanted to scratch Ezekiel.
Yeah.
Brings about the wrath of God.
Right.
That's probably a subject we don't talk about enough too.
The wrath
of God.
Truly.
Yeah. That's a scary subject. But hey, let me ask you this. We're near end of time.
Yeah.
This has been like minutes to me. I love talking with you.
Same.
I'm not just saying that because the camera's on. I really do.
You're on record right now.
Record. I see what you did there. Very well.
Oh.
Very well played. So I want to ask two questions. Okay. Whatever time. It's fine. We're architecting new time.
We're architecting
spaces.
in time right now.
I love that.
We're architects.
What are your favorite records? You're a kid in the 90s.
Okay,
like
here we go.
Who and it's okay if they're non-Christian.
Yeah.
I fully expect.
No, I don't.
That.
I mean, to be honest, I listen to mostly non-Christian music.
Yeah. Who do you play?
So during the day, I play a lot of Krungbin. They're a band who actually they are Christians. It's just hilarious.
Called
Krungbin, because it's more about the vibe that you're creating.
Okay.
So
yeah.
like this is actually something I'm going to eventually build out with Analog Sunday. Like your perfect record spinning day. Mm-hmm. You know, you have your slow morning breakfast. What do you put on? Well, let's put on some Bon Iver. Okay. You know, For Emma Forever Ago. That album, just the perfect.
I don't know it.
Yeah, you should.
Okay.
It's so good. And then as the day kind of picks up, you put on a little Krungbin, and Krungbin's kind of like these guys would go on mission trips.
Carlo's laughing at Krungbin.
You like Krungbin? Do you know Krungbin? All right, let's get that.
Carlo
playing.
never heard of it. We're gonna do the outro music. Krungbin.
The drummer and the guitarist were on a worship band in Houston, and they'd stay afterwards playing after service, and they just start jamming.
Just kind of jamming.
And then I guess I'm not sure how the girl got brought in, who's the bass player, but they'd go on mission trips to Indonesia, and they got exposed to Indonesian funk. And so their fusion of that with this, like, it's just like groovy, just like perfect background vibes.
Is it Krungbin with a K or a C?
Khru, Krungbin.
That's enough to get us
It's really
there.
hard.
Google.
Khru.
Yeah. I'm going to listen to them today.
You should. So those are my favorite records to spin on Analog Sunday. And then, maybe some Sufjan Stevens or some, if you want to go old school, we could put on like Cat Stevens, which is kind of hilarious.
I'm with you on those too. I know those.
If we want to do some older stuff, Cat Stevens all day.
Were you the grunge guy? Did you live through that period of life?
I did. I mean, but it has to be the right
That doesn't
vibe.
necessarily create the right vibe.
I'm going to put on Nevermind
on a Sunday.
Nevermind is like when you're having this quality time. Yeah, if you're cleaning the house or you're like just chilling, throw that on.
Amped up for something.
Yeah, I put on some Pearl Jam.
I was going to ask Pearl Jam. Okay.
Yeah, gotta love me some Pearl Jam.
How about Foo Fighters?
I was a big Foo Fighters fan.
You?
For sure. I still am, I guess.
Pretty talented. I mean, Dave.
Yeah, that Dave.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, Italian. Just kidding. I don't think he's Italian. You'd like him more.
For the disclaimer, not everything revolves around Italian. It's just a funny little thing.
Yeah.
So Krungbin, I love it.
Yeah. So so those are my favorite records to kind of spin.
What's next with Analog Sunday?
So Analog Sunday right now, I'm building out the whole the web. I just have a landing page now. The branding is all coming together.
Awesome. So it's becoming a thing.
It's becoming a whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of families doing it now on Sundays.
Okay.
So I'm reaching out to families as beta testers.
Gotcha.
On Friday and just inviting them like, hey, you should do an Analog Sunday. We're realizing that we're getting data, which is really cool. 75% of families who want to do an Analog Sunday can't their first Sunday. They just
they have to change a schedule.
Yeah. They realize I'll do Analog Sunday. And we've been telling people to just do 90 minutes.
Okay.
Just 90 minutes.
Just a block of time.
Just boom. Phone away, 90 minutes.
Okay.
Simple, easy start.
Yeah.
Eventually it'll bloom 90 minutes to, 4 hours to
I think you'll long for
8 hours. Yeah, you will.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, dude, this is great.
Yeah.
But 75% of families on that first invitation can't do it. But 100% of those families are wanting to do it again.
Okay.
And then the following week, they're all able to do it.
Okay.
So we realized that
they made space.
They made the space. So they kind of crashed and burned that first time, just like my family did that first Sabbath.
Sure.
And then you kind of are like,
Kids are
wait, but this is a
revolting.
good thing to do. Let's figure it out. And you have to plan ahead. You have to.
That was the Old Testament Sabbath.
It is the Old Testament
do
Sabbath.
more on Saturday so you could rest fully on Sunday.
Yes. And so what I'm building out is a way to start communicating with people en masse, because it's already overwhelming for me to just text people. I forget. I leave people. I don't follow up with anyone on Monday.
There are systems can help with that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of so that's what I'm looking at, and eventually I really think like we're going to build out some sort of like Duolingo kind of like, download this app, and then eventually like this, we'll notify you, we'll keep you busy. We're going to let you know, okay, put in your zip code, you live in Nebraska. Hey, there's this awesome Analog Sunday event happening, or here's all the events to do with your family this weekend.
Wow.
Because people they do need that idea. So there's so much to build out. I'm just at the beginning of it, but
the sky's the
first
limit.
step is, branding, website, land, all of that.
Awesome.
And, wherever the Lord wants to take it, I'm just stewarding something that of His.
Yeah.
It's not mine.
Awesome.
That's all I see.
Awesome. Julian, thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you for your time, your
Thank
friendship.
you. Thanks for having me on
And
here.
thank you for being willing to share what God's put in your heart. I think we need more of that in our world. It takes courage. It takes vulnerability. But I think there's real beauty when we actually get to see the way God is speaking to other people. He's actually speaking to us too. So thank you. Thanks
for having
everybody.
me.
Project 167. We'll see you next time.